Them like me, them fire catapult of envy.
Beautiful piece there from Brimo. It's been a while. Where have you been, Brimo? Anyways, it is still Ogtv Splash on Open State Television, and we are on the personality segment. And today we'll be discussing something everyone is shying away from. I like to put it like that because our society, in a way, somehow hypocritical. So today we'll be discussing tackling the stigma of mental health in Nigeria. And I have the right resource person with me here in the studio. His name is Dr. Emmanuel Abayomi. He's a consultant psychiatrist, Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Aro, Abeokuta. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Lara. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to have you here.
My pleasure to be here.
All right then. And I hope that I'm safe discussing this topic with you. You won't be trying to analyze my mental state and all that.
Absolutely, you're safe. In any case, but any attempt to do that would be discriminatory, which
Perfect.
would be stigmatizing, which I believe is against what we're here to talk about today.
Perfect then. So I'm free to, answer
Yes,
my
you're free.
questions.
Thank
All right
you.
then. Let's start from the beginning. What is mental health?
Right. The World Health Organization would have us describe mental health as that psychological state whereby an individual is able to accomplish four things. The first is reach his or her potentials, and the second is bounce back from life's normal stresses, and the third is being productive, produce something, and then the fourth component of mental health is to contribute meaningfully to one's community. I take it again. The first is reach your potential.
Okay.
The second is resilience, bounce back from life's normal stresses. The third is being productive, and the fourth is contributing meaningfully to your community. If you're able to do that, that state whereby you're able to accomplish this, that's what the World Health Organization refers to as mental health.
Okay. If that is mental health, so that means that people that come short of one or more of these four beautiful stages I highlighted are mentally unstable.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It is not dichotomous. It is not all or none. In other words, some people may not have an outright mental illness, but they may not be enjoying optimal mental health. In other words, deficiencies in some of these refers to suboptimal mental health, but not necessarily mental illness.
Okay, let's just relate this to layman's language.
Okay.
Are you saying now that I can have malaria symptoms and not have the malaria parasite? Just like you're saying, I might be deficient of these four stages, but not necessarily mentally ill.
Exactly, but not directly related to malaria, which is purely a physical illness. However, for mental health and mental illness, it is complex. The factors that contribute to what we know as mental illness is quite complex. There are biological components like you have in malaria, and then there are cultural, there are social, environmental, and psychological components that interact in complex ways to result to what we call mental illness. Rather, if you would permit me, adopt a physical condition that some of us may be familiar with. Diabetes, for example.
Okay.
Some people may be familiar with the fact that we check their blood sugars, and when we find values greater than 120 milligrams per dl, we say they are diabetic. However, the normal range is from 75 to about 115 or 110.
Okay.
Now there is an interval between 110 and 120.
20.
Very good.
Okay.
Now people who have between 110 and 120, you may say they have impaired glucose tolerance, but not necessarily diabetic. In a similar vein, people may have deficiencies in these, but not necessarily having mental illness.
illness.
The reverse is also true. People who have suffered from a mental illness, can actually enjoy optimal mental health. In other words, in spite of the mental illness they've suffered from, they can still go reach their full potentials. They can bounce back if they suffer from life's normal stresses. They can be productive and they can contribute meaningfully to their community.
Okay then, so let's talk about the causes of this mental illness. What are the causes?
Well, like I said earlier, there is no known exact single causative factor of mental illness like we have in malaria. You find Plasmodium falciparum, that's the parasite that causes malaria. But for mental illness, it's not that simple and straightforward. Many factors contribute to it. One of them is genetics, heredity, family history. Another is medical problems that people may suffer from, contributing to mental illness. And then there are psychological problems like adverse childhood experiences, trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse that people experience during childhood may make them vulnerable to suffering from a mental illness later in life. And then people's thinking styles, people's personality traits. Later on, people's use of psychoactive substances and alcohol may also predispose them to coming down with mental illnesses. And then socioeconomic factors, for example, poverty, unemployment, life events like a divorce, a separation, exam failure, job losses, relationship difficulties, even death of a loved one. All of this contribute in and interact in complex ways and leads to what we know as mental illness. In other words, you may not be able to place your finger on one exact factor. Rather, many factors, some of which I listed earlier, contribute in complex ways, resulting to what we call a mental illness. For context, two different people may suffer from a relationship breakdown. While one person cries and weeps over it and gets back herself and continues with her life, another person may suffer from a depression. Similar losses, similar relationship failures, but different reactions. One person bounces back, the other person suffers from a mental illness. So there are other factors like my family history, for example, and other social factors, ways of thinking that may contribute to an individual's coming down with mental illness.
Okay, after highlighting those causes, likely causes, which are not necessarily the real causes.
Yes.
Okay, now let's talk about the symptoms. What are those things that are likely to be seen or the mental deficient person exhibits?
Oh yes. I would like us to look at the symptoms of mental illness in about 5 or 6 broad categories.
Okay.
And the first really is sleep. Sleep changes or sleep disturbances. In other words, when the quality and the duration of sleep becomes disturbed. When sleep is insufficient, people sleep less than usual and then they feel less refreshed after sleep. The reverse may also be true. Sleep, when it becomes excessive, it may be a symptom of mental illness. For example, depressive disorders. Yes!
So, okay, what do you mean by excessive? Because there are some of us who takes an afternoon nap and all that.
Well, afternoon nap is considered normal.
Okay.
Excessive,
so what is excessive?
Excessive is relative. Excessive could be described as when sleep becomes so much that it begins to interfere with your normal day-to-day activities. When you ought to be up and running, yet you're in bed sleeping. That may be considered excessive. When it's so much that it interferes with your day-to-day activities, you're not happy about it, and your loved ones, family members also begin to complain, then that may well be excessive. Another major broad category of symptom to consider is your emotions. Yes, emotions. Again, when you experience extremes of emotions, either we are too sad for too long, too frequently.
I'd like to cut you short there.
Okay.
Because there's a saying that says there's no right way to grieve. especially when you've lost a loved one.
Yes.
There is no right or wrong way to grieve.
Yes.
So if someone grieves for too long, just like, okay, definitely the person will bounce back or something.
Yes.
So now that you're talking about feeling sad for too long.
Yes.
I mean, what if the person is grieving?
Oh yes, and then there is what we consider a normal grieving process, which is normal, which is understandable, and then there is what we call complicated grief, which is abnormal. And then essentially three major things when we're looking at complicated grief. That's one. The first is when it is more intense than what is considered normal. The second is the duration. The first is intense, and the second is the duration, when it lasts longer than normal. Many cases when it lasts longer than 1 year after the experience of loss. And then the third is abnormal behaviors associated with grief.
Okay, let's move on to the next one now. The treatment options. Can one be totally healed?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Available.
Thank you for that very direct answer. Yes.
Yes.
So that takes us to the topic, the stigmatization.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Nigeria, and we have lots of beliefs, dogmas, and myths. Especially, okay, let's talk about it in the Yoruba settings.
Yes.
I hear things like maybe for someone that just got back from Arrow, for instance.
That's where I work, for example.
Okay, we just laughed.
Yes.
Let's imagine the person also laughed. You know, people will be like, oh my God, I hope that thing is not bad. And then there are other means like, oh, that such a person cannot be entirely healed. There will be some times, maybe once in a while, the thing will just come back and all that. What do you think? What are the means? What are the facts?
Well, I'm sorry to say, but all you've just stated belong to the category of the mix.
Really?
Yes, apparently far from the reality, from what evidence shows us. A good number of mental health conditions can be treated effectively. And then culturally, there is this word we use, alawoku. Research has shown that that is incorrect. It's a misperception. It's a myth. It's a misrepresentation.
Really?
Of treatment for mental health. Yes, it is.
So you're saying now that they can be totally and perfectly fine?
Well, while perfection, I consider perfection utopian and beyond present human reality. Let's get back to the definition of mental health.
Okay then.
Now, people who've suffered a mental illness can receive treatment, and then they can go back to reach their full potential. They can go on to have a PhD if they so wish. They can go on to work, get married, have children, build homes, build wonderful families, and contribute meaningfully to the society. They can bounce back from life's normal stresses. In the context of mental health, people who've suffered a mental illness can actually go on to enjoy that. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of people who do not suffer from a diagnosable mental illness are still striving to reach their full potentials. They're striving to bounce back from life's normal stresses.
This last one before we go. What's your advice for those who have suffered mental health? Because this stigmatization is there, whether they like it or not.
True.
They can't automatically change the society.
Yes.
Your last word for that before we go.
My last word for them, if you permit me, I'll say two things. Well, the first is seek treatment. Treatment is available, is effective, and is affordable. So seek treatment. The second is don't isolate yourself. Go out there, mix with people, whether or not they want to welcome you. Go out there and mix with people. And perhaps a third, a bonus, is don't equate your illness with your person. You are bigger than your illness. You are more than to your illness. There is more to you than a schizophrenia, depression, anxiety disorder. You are a complex human being. There are numerous sides to your economy, your academics, your family, your being, your health, your physique, your potentials. Mental illness, or your illness for that matter, is just one tiny bit of your whole being. Do not equate your illness with yourself.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Dr. Emmanuel Abayomi.
My pleasure, Lara.
Please, before you go, how do you relax apart from being at work?
Oh, yes. I jog in the mornings, I jump and skip ropes, and then I cycle and take nature walks with my daughter.
Beautiful, beautiful then. Okay then, it is still Ogtv Splash on Ogun State Television. Right now we're having the blast from the past by the legendary Bob Marley. Please stay with us.
Them like me, them fire catapult of envy.